Hi, this is Noel Kearns. I'm the judge for the August contest for the Plano Photography Club. To give you a little bit of background on myself, I've been into photography for over 40 years with a background originally in documentary and large format landscape photography. But more recently, about 11 years ago, I started photographing abandoned buildings at night by the moonlight using a supplemental lighting technique called light painting. The photographs that I produced using those techniques began to get the attention of some people, as well as a publisher from the United Kingdom that wanted to do a book of my work. That book came out in 2013. It was called Night Watch: Painting with Light. And when it was released, some media outlets like ABC News, Huffington Post, Slate, Daily Mail, BBC, and so on and so forth, they covered that release and did some articles on it, and my career sort of really started to take off from there. And I've got representation now with several online galleries that sell my work, and like any photographer, I make a chunk of my living selling photographs and photographing new locations and trying to get that work in front of potential clients. So that's kind of the reason I'm your judge this month. I think that's probably how Jerry found out about me, heard about me, and just to let you know, I'm also a hometown boy. I live right here in Plano too. So thanks for the opportunity to judge your contest. And finally, just to say real quick that I hope you take any comments or criticisms I might have about your work in the spirit in which I intend them, which is to be constructive and not negative or personal in any way. So again, thank you for the opportunity, and I hope you enjoy my comments. Okay, so the first photo is Remembering Our Fallen. It's a scene of some flags in a park setting. The exposure is pretty close, maybe a half stop brighter than I might like to have otherwise seen it, but the challenge I have with this picture is the composition. I think there might have been an opportunity for a stronger composition with this scene here. It's just the way it's presented, it just doesn't really draw me in to want to spend any amount of time really looking at the photograph, so maybe a little bit stronger composition. Okay, this photograph is Nary a Headstone Was Harmed. It's a tree in a cemetery that's fallen down. Death among the dying, you might say. Again, from a composition standpoint, I'd like to have seen the left edge of the Simons monument included, as well as the bottom of the crypt in the lower right-hand corner. From an exposure standpoint, you'll notice how some of the headstones are really washed out. I would like to have seen that controlled a little bit better. Maybe a little bit tighter dynamic range and a slight recomposition could have strengthened this photograph a bit. The next shot here is called Lighthouse Visit. It's a nice scene of a lighthouse. One might argue that, well, it might have been a more compelling natural scene without so many people crawling all over the rocks there, but that sort of becomes a bit of the subject as well. The biggest thing that I might say about this is that it seems like the image is just a little bit soft. I think the composition's fine. The exposure's great. The colors are natural. It looks really nice, but just maybe a little bit soft. The next photo is A Glimpse You Will Never Forget. It's a deer against a mountain scene. There are just a couple of elements in this shot that you really can't do anything about as a photographer. One is the sign that's peeking out behind the deer, and two is, of course, that stone wall in front. It would be really nice if it wasn't there, but it is, and it's still a nice photograph as it is. The most compelling element of this photograph, though, from my standpoint, is the beautiful golden hour light you're getting from the right there. It looks really nice, and I think this is a super nice capture. Finally, the last photo in the entry division is the division winner, Cloudy Day on the Lake, with a score of 12. Beautiful shot. I love the processing the clouds. There's interest in detail in them without being overdone. A real sense of light coming from them. The composition, I think, is super strong. The boat is just exactly where it should be. Yeah, overall, just a really nice shot. Very worthy winner, I think, for the entry-level division. Okay, so the first entry in the intermediate division is Yellow Flower. It's essentially an oil painting interpretation of a flower, and that relates to my problem with the image and the reason I scored it only 7 points. Honestly, I really can't evaluate it as a photograph because it's been processed beyond the point of where it even resembles a photograph. It looks like an oil painting at this point. And that's my problem with it in the context of a photography contest, which is why I scored it 7 points. So it's a beautiful image, and it's processed well, I think, for what you're trying to accomplish. But again, I really can't consider it to be a photograph anymore. Okay, so the next photo with a score of 7 points in the intermediate division is a local store closes after zombie attack. It's an abandoned Walmart. The exposure is pretty close. Again, it might be a little bit on the bright side, especially the parking lot's kind of a little bit washed out. The biggest challenge I have with the photograph when doing any sort of architectural photography, which is essentially what this is making sure that you have your lines squared up. You'll notice the lines that are not squared to the edge of the frame at the right side of the shot and at the left side of the shot. Also, the composition, I think, is almost documentary and not terribly compelling from a viewer standpoint. Maybe a composition focusing on the center area where the Walmart sign itself is with the 3 doors around it might have yielded a more symmetrically appealing and compelling composition. A little tighter on that might have been how I would have gone. Okay, the next shot is Sunset Fisherman. Very nice shot. Almost looks like it could be used as a marketing shot for a neighborhood or a community that's trying to sell land, because it's a very nice sunset shot. Really, about the only 2 challenges I have with this is that it was shot with I think a Canon T3i, it said, and I think some of the digital noise from the over-processing of pulling detail out of the shadow areas across the lake and in the trees above has yielded a lot of digital noise artifacts. Those could be processed out, and I think that would strengthen the shot quite a bit while still keeping detail in those shadow areas. Next shot with a score of 8 is called Breathtaking. It's a beautiful sunset scene with some trees in the foreground. The sunset is timed perfectly, and it's balanced nicely as from an exposure standpoint. My challenge is with the lack of a real focal point in the shot, and just as a result, a relatively disinteresting composition with just trees and the sunset. Maybe finding another subject to capture that same sunset and put a little more perspective on it might have been a better choice. Okay, so the next photo is titled Butterfly on an Orange. I gave that 9 points. It's a strong composition. The colors are beautiful, the orange with the green in the background, and it's a gorgeous butterfly. The only challenge I have, or the only problem I have with this shot, is it's a little bit soft. This type of shot lives and dies by having it be tack sharp and being able to see the detail in the texture of the wings and in the orange and things like that. And it's just soft enough that we lose that detail, but a very nearly perfect attempt at this type of shot. The next shot is outside the diner at Cedar Point with a score of 10 points. Really nice exposure. The trees in the background lit look great. Maybe a little bright on the little stands underneath them, but a beautiful shot. The only thing is the street light or the parking lot light that appears to be lighting up the front of the vehicle there is just a little bit on the bright side for my taste, but I think you could have probably darkened the entire image a little bit and produced a little bit more of a compelling shot. Okay, so the next photo with a score of 10 points is Moving Train from Nowhere. This is a beautiful scene. This is the leading lines of the train tracks, and the fact that they're lit from the light coming from the end of the tunnel there, if you will, all the way down so that you see them the whole way. It's gorgeous. I might have gone with a slightly different composition, maybe a vertical composition on this, perhaps even foregoing the inclusion of the signs on the right side. I do like the signs, but I think the composition could be a little stronger on this. Okay, the next photo is Bride, Lisbon, Portugal, with a score of 10 points. Very nicely processed, very tasteful. The vignetting on the left side of the frame especially, I think, creates a nice contrast to the bright white of her dress. Beautiful young lady. This is just, in a way, though, it's as technically sound as the photograph is. This isn't a shot that really draws me in and makes me want to spend an extended amount of time looking at it, which is why the score was 10 points instead of maybe 12 or 13 points. Okay, so the next photograph with a score of 11 is Fountain. A great capture of the water. That's obviously the star of the show here. The fact that you've got the kid playing in it there, and it's not really clear what all's going on there, is really the subject of the photograph, and that's I think that's what makes it a compelling image. The way the light is playing with the splashing water too, it all makes it come together, and I think it's a really nice shot. Okay, so the next photo with a score of 11 points is Oxpecker Gets to Work. That's a really interesting photo. You don't often get to see an ox this close up and see all the gritty detail in the horns and around the face and the eyes and the eyelashes even on the ox there, and his little tongue sticking out there. You can't really tell. There's no expression whether he likes the fact that the bird is there or not. It's a very nice photograph, though. I think the exposure is proper, maybe a little darker. A half stop darker might have been, and just to let you know, I'm looking at all these photographs on a calibrated 4K monitor, but yeah, just a little bit brighter than I might have presented it, but overall I think it's a strong photo. The next photo with a score of 12 is Pure Serenity. Man, that's a tack-sharp duck. I love the detail in the feathers, mixed with the smoothness and the fluidity of the water behind it. Looks really, it's a really nice contrast, and I think it's captured beautifully. The exposure for my taste is spot on, and I think this is a really nice job. Very well done photograph. Okay, the next photo with a score of 12 also is Star of the Show. It's referring to the white flower amongst the other tulips, I guess those are there, whatever kind of flowers they are. But really the star of this show, from my standpoint, is the light coming in and backlighting some of these flowers. Is what really creates the shot, along with the very nice bokeh, out of focus bokeh going away. This is a beautiful shot. I love the textures and the way the light's playing on the flowers. I think this is really, really well done. All right, the next photo is Butterfly with a score of 13. This is the lighting. It almost looks like there might be some supplemental lighting used here, and I think it was done very tastefully because the leaves are lit up beautifully. We've got the detail that should be there in the flowers and the butterfly. I think this is a really nice example of this style of photograph, and very, very masterfully done. Good job. All right, the next photograph with a score of 14 is Barn Owl. And, one of the things I like about looking at animal photographs in particular is the fact that a lot of times I'm able to see detail and learn about an animal by seeing detail captured in a photograph that I just could never see with the naked eye or when you see them in the wild. And this is a great example of that. Some of the detail around the edges of the face, the fur and the hair and everything around the eyes, it's really remarkable. This is a really, really nicely done photograph. Well presented, well composed, excellent job. And finally, the winner for me in the intermediate category with a score of 14 is Psychedelic Pistol. Beautiful macro shot. I mean, this is just gorgeous. The colors, the composition, the blue background's a great choice. I don't know whether that was a choice or whether just what was naturally presented. But this is a gorgeous shot. I love the detail in it. Sort of like that last shot I mentioned where you get to see detail that you just don't get to see, with your naked eye and in natural life. The one thing you might have done is the sensor looks like it was a little bit dirty there. I see some sensor spots, but they don't really disrupt the photograph in any way for me, and I think this is the winner for the intermediate category. Okay, so the first photo in the advanced division we're looking at is a picture taken Noel Haga somewhere in Sweden. Beautiful composition, like the bridge and the pond and then the villa in the distance there. It's a little HDR'd for my taste. A lot of the shadows that would normally be appearing there are lightened beyond the point of the natural effect. But my biggest problem is the masking of the sky, or actually not the masking of the sky, the darkening of the sky with the telltale fringe signs around the trees. At the advanced level, I kind of like to see the entire sky masked off and a more consistent darkening effect applied across it, so we don't have that fringing effect around the edges and where it's glowing around the trees. The next photo is Galaxy in Midsummer. I gave it 10 stars. Nice catch with catching the meteor in the shot. The only criticism I would have for this shot is it's a little bit soft, not in the sky and the stars so much. That's always going to be slightly soft because of the motion of the stars. Even with a 10 or 15 second exposure, if you have a lens fast enough to catch that, but it's still even a little soft, I think, in the trees, and that could just be a byproduct perhaps of wind or something like that. But it's a nice shot. Just a little sharper would have been nice on the foreground subject. Okay, the next photo is Lauren. I gave it 10 stars. Perfectly nice portrait, well lit, beautiful model, and a great smile. Really, there's no critic. The only thing, maybe catch the top of the hat too, instead of cropping it out, but that's nitpicking really because shot looks great. Have no problems with it at all. The next shot is Green Iguana in Miami. Wow, super composition, well-timed shot. That's always a big thing with wildlife shots. Very nice timing on that, great pose. The only criticism, again, is it does feel like it might have been HDR'd a little heavily. And from my perspective, actually presented maybe even as much as about a full stop brighter than I think it would be most effective. Okay, the next shot is Fog. I gave it 11 stars. This is a really nice composition, just exactly composed how you would want it to be. The only things that keep me from being a little more compelled by it are the fact that it's such a brand new kind of shiny metal bench, and the lack of I think it would be a little bit of a stronger shot if we had a subject maybe sitting on the bench too, and so. But for what it is, as it is, it's a strong compo and nicely presented. Okay, the next shot is Beauty and the Beast. First of all, the composition is really strong. Personally, I might have backed off just slightly to give a little more city context around it. The ad is great. The distempt expression on the model's face is great. I think I'd probably look that way too if they told me I had to wear a leopard skin pimp jacket in a commercial. But I think a better statement in it certainly would have been a setup to do this, or unless you got really lucky. Instead of a pretty young lady standing in front of that sign, what if it was an old street person or a homeless person with their belongings standing there looking really really desperate and displaced, with this erudite little punk of a kid in the ad standing over him. I think that might have been a little bit of a more effective shot. So I think it has the capability of yielding a really powerful shot with a couple of slight tweaks to it. Okay, the next photo is Waiting in the Light. I gave it 12 stars. This is a really strong, the light, the color, everything in this is just really gorgeous. The composition is also really strong. Might have squared up a couple of the lines, if possible, on the left side there. Overall, I think this is a great shot, and again, with the animal in it, you waited to a good time to catch the side glance and the pose. The only thing holding this back from having a higher score is perhaps just a little more interest in it for me, besides just the cat and the wall there, and no real context for what I'm looking at besides a cat. So. Okay, the next photo I gave 12 stars. It's called Shaggy. It's a sheep that could probably stand a haircut, or a fur cut, or a shearing, or I guess whatever you would give a sheep. Again, like so many of the other photographs, this is a really nice example because it really captures that gritty detail in an animal up close, all the detail in the fur and around the nose and everything. So that's a super job on that, and presented very well. Maybe slightly brighter than I might have presented it, but overall, I think it looks great. Okay, the next photograph is Red Poppies. I gave it 13 points or stars. Man, I love the perspective on this. This is a really, really awesome perspective and a super shot. The way the light from the sun is just playing on the stalks of or the stems rather, of the flowers, and playing through the petals of the flowers, and the idyllic looking blue sky with the clouds. Really, really gorgeous. This is a superb shot. Very well done. Okay, the next photo is the Glory Window in Thanksgiving Square. Gave it 14 stars. Beautiful capture of the light, the dark areas, the shadow areas, and the colors. The colors are perfectly presented all along. I really like this shot. It's semi-abstract. I mean, I know this is kind of a postcard shot from Thanksgiving Square, but this is a very well done edition of it, so you might say so. Nicely done. Very, very good shot. Okay, the next photo is Salt and Pepper. I gave it 14 stars because I think this shot is fantastic. It's one of my favorites in the entire show. When I first saw this, it reminded me of Ralph Goings. He was an American photorealist painter who died a couple of years ago. His work is very much like this. It's all about composition, light, shadow, and the way the light plays on the subjects. And I think this is just beautiful. Everything is just as it should be in this shot. Very nicely done. Okay, so the next photo is a Taking 5 coal miner. I gave it 14 stars because it's another just fantastic shot. I mean, what can you say? Look at the grit, the detail, the smoke, everything. The vignetting is nice. The bokeh gives a little context without distracting. The only thing that does distract me a little bit is whatever's going on in the lower right-hand corner, but it's really a relatively minor detail. Yeah, everything's the composition, the looking up. A very emotive and compelling photo. Nice job. Okay, so finally the winning photograph in the advanced category is Wheatfield Pattern. This thing is all about the composition and the control of the dynamic range, so that the light areas and the shadow really give the texture and the topology. Just show it off and let you really get a sense of what you're looking at. The canal or coming through from the top is in the perfect place. The two elements, elements along the left side are just exactly where they should be in the composition. Just overall a beautiful photograph. I'm a big fan of this style of stuff. I love this and I think this is a super example of it. Nice job. Okay, so the first photograph we're going to look at in the now Masters category is outside the canvas painting store, Granbury, Texas. I gave it 7 stars, and the reason I only ranked it 7 stars is this is kind of, from my perspective, and again, this is me, another example of a technique or an effect filter applied to a photograph that kind of invalidates it to be able to be considered still a photograph. I think that's some sort of an iPhone effect with that squiggly pattern all over basically everything in the photograph. It's nothing wrong with doing that, but I think that's taking it beyond the point at which it can still be considered a photograph. So I can't really score it terribly highly in a photography contest. Okay, the next photograph in the Masters category is Grand Canyon Glory. I gave it 9 stars. Scored lower primarily just because of the really obvious heavy work that was done to pull the shadows out. When you've got the sun setting on the horizon and yet you're still seeing full detail in the canyon, that's obviously a lot of work going on there. For me, an unnatural look to that kind of ruins the effect of the photograph, as well as the excessive manipulation of the clouds across the top as well. So I had to score it down because of those things. Okay, the next photo in the Masters category is Bullets for Peace. It's perfectly balanced exposure, nicely composed. The only challenge from the standpoint of evaluating this in a photography contest, from my perspective, is that without doing some substantial work on the internet really to kind of learn what this installation is and what I'm looking at here, I really didn't have any idea what I was looking at until I looked up on the internet, and as such, I just don't feel that as a standalone photograph, without the context of that internet search, that it holds up in the context of a photography contest. Okay, the next photo is Tremella Fungus Among Us. I gave it 10 stars. It's a nicely almost a documentary shot of this fungus. It's very curious. It almost looks delicious. Actually, it's kind of weird. Almost looks like you want to eat it or break some of it off and like candy or something. But it's definitely an unusual formation there, and it's very nicely captured in this shot. The next shot in the Masters category with a score of 10 is yellow lineup. Some flowers there with the first one being nice and crisply focused, the other two being just slightly out. For my taste, I would have liked to have seen perhaps all three in more focus. In fact, it almost looks like the last flower is in better focus than the second flower, which is kind of an unusual phenomenon from a depth of field standpoint, but maybe there was motion or something. But I gave it 10 stars, and it's a nicely exposed and presented photograph. Okay, the next photograph in the Masters category with a score of 10 is Mudflats at Mont Saint-Michel. This is easily the most abstract photo in the entire contest. It's beautiful, the wavy in the foreground and everything. It's really striking. It's almost, in fact, it is hard for me to get a sense of scale and the perspective of what I'm looking at here. It's very unusual, but it's a beautiful sort of abstract photograph and nicely presented. Okay, the next photo is Western Montana skyline. Man, if I was with the Western Montana Tourist Board, I think I'd be more than happy to take that photo off your hands and use it as our marketing image, because it's really gorgeous. The clouds, the mountains in the distance. The only thing I might like to see in this picture would be maybe a piece of old farm equipment or a barn or something kind of left center foreground. But it's really gorgeous. Very nice work. Okay, the next photo in the Masters category with a score of 12 is Cowhand. Wow, it's nice and sharp. It's beautifully exposed and composed. The guy looks like he could be a real cowhand. I don't know whether it's a model or a reenactor of some sort, but he certainly looks the part, except for the glasses, which do kind of kill the effect a little bit for me. But it's overall a very nice photograph. 12 stars. Okay, the next photo with a score of 13 stars is Miami. Just a great compo. It's nice and wide, which is exactly what you would want for this layout. The palm trees, the stillness in the water, except for where it's being disturbed by the little boat that's just where it should be. In fact, this whole picture doesn't work. This whole composition and photo doesn't work without that boat and that wake behind it. So this is a really beautiful job. I love this, and it looks great in black and white. Very nicely done. Gorgeous photo. Okay, so the next photo is Sedona at sunset. Just a really peaceful, beautiful, just to get a sense of a really nice, quiet scene there with the little houses down there on the hillside below the buttes there. This is a photo that also appears to have had some work done to it, but the result is still, in my estimation, very natural and tastefully presented. Super nice job. I gave it 14 points. Beautiful work. All right. Well, I'm partial to night shots, and this is a twilight type shot. Really beautiful shot of a bridge. The motion of the everything's perfect. The stop down to small enough aperture to get at the starburst effect on not only the street lights but the lights on the bridge as well, and the headlights of the car. And a super nice compo. Everything's really balanced and just as it should be. Gorgeous capture. Really, really nice. The next photo in the Masters category is Curved Bill Thrasher, which I gave 15 stars to. I gave it a perfect score because it's a perfect photograph. I mean, the timing, the crisp detail, the angle, the bokeh, the diffuse background with the bokeh. It's gorgeous. Everything about that is just exactly as it should be. This is a beautiful example of bird photography. Really, really nice. Okay, finally, the winner in the Masters category is the Wrangler. And I'll be honest, I also gave it 15 stars, and I went back and forth between this and the Curved Bill Thrasher photo. They're both perfect, but there's just so much that had to be just right in this photograph for it to work. The positions of the animals, none of them are in an awkward position while they're in an awkward running position or anything like that. The dog is perfect. The horse that's being led by the wrangler, the expression and the position's just right. The look of the wrangler himself, the position and the pose is just you couldn't sit him on a still horse and pose him any more perfectly for this shot than he is there. The red of his nose, kind of giving you a sense of the cold. The snow kind of in front of the horse there, kind of blowing up or being disturbed there. Everything's just perfect. This is a really, really nice shot. Very well done. Congratulations to all the entrants, especially the winners, and to thank you guys for allowing me to judge your photography this month. It's been a pleasure looking at all your images, and I wish you all the best with your photography in the future.